Hello and welcome to Home Cooking 2020. Home Cooking 2020 is brought to you from Sligo Leader Partnership Company and SICAP, Social Inclusion Community Activation Programme, funded by the Irish Government and the European Social Fund. Today we're going to make white sauce, which is the basis for many other sauces and a great sauce just on its own. It can go on after you've made the basic sauce to become a cheese sauce with cheese, a parsley sauce with parsley, cheese and mustard, any other thing really that you like to add to it to add flavour. So the first most important thing is to have your milk infused with some flavour. So we have some bay leaf, an onion studded with some cloves and some black peppercorns. So we have heated up our milk, brought it to the boil and then let it simmer for about 10 to 20 minutes with the onion, the bay leaf and the cloves. If you have some parsley stalks as well, parsley stalks are really good. And then you just strain that off. You're not going to use those ingredients. So our milk is still hot. It's really important to remember to use hot milk when you're making a white sauce. So I've melted the butter already, or you can melt it in the pot. You have about 50 grams of butter and 50 grams of flour, always equal quantities of flour and butter. And you're going to incorporate the flour into the butter to make a sandy texture. You can do this over a low heat just to incorporate it. You don't want to burn it because it's going to be a white sauce. Just incorporate that in until it's what we call a sandy texture. So we just have a look at it there, nice and incorporate it, and then get your hot milk. If you have a whisk, you can use a whisk. If you're good with your wooden spoon, you can use your wooden spoon, and you just always pour a little bit in at a time, always slowly. So just incorporate a little bit of liquid at a time, stirring. There's a lot of stirring. And it's cooking on the low heat as you're doing this, and gradually you're getting all of your milk incorporated. Once all of your milk is in the flour and butter mixture, which we call a roux, then you can just bring it to a low boil and let it simmer for about 10 minutes just to cook out the flour. And at that point, if you wanted to make your white sauce into a parsley sauce or a cheese sauce, you can add your seasoning. So our white sauce is now ready to take the rest of the milk and nicely incorporate it, and again we're keeping stirring. At this point you can use your whisk as well, and it's coming slowly to the boil. So it's important to make sure you stir the bottom of the pot so nothing is sticking at the bottom and there's loose liquid at the top. And just keep stirring. And we'll just let that come to the boil and get our whisk then to get ready to stir with the whisk. So we have our white sauce, and I've just brought the whisk in because it's got a few lumps. It's starting to get nice and shiny, and you can just make sure it's nice and shiny. Lumps are beaten out, and if you feel it's a little bit too thick, you can add a little bit more milk to it, even cold milk at this point, and help it. So you can see it's still a little bit lumpy. So if you like, you can use your stick blender . And some people even use the stick blender from the very beginning. Just even adding all the ingredients at the same time and just stick blending it, and it seems to work just as well. But that's our white sauce, which we're just going to check for seasoning, and we'll add a little bit more salt, pepper, if we want to add it to that. And that's going to be used for the basis of our white sauce for our lasagna. So if you're keeping the white sauce until you're ready to use it, it's important to cover it with either some leftover butter paper, or if you dampen down some baking parchment, and just make sure the whole lot is completely covered. If you don't do this, it will form a hard skin on the top, and you don't really want that. So because we're going to leave it here for a few minutes until we have the rest of our ingredients ready for the lasagna, I'm covering it over with some dampened parchment paper. So we're going to continue in making our lasagna. We have some nice lean minced beef. We also have some chopped tomato, some dried oregano, some chopped garlic, some diced onion, some unsmoked bacon, and some salt, and a little pinch of sugar. Just because we're using tomatoes, we always use a little pinch of sugar just to bring out the sweetness in the tomatoes. We're going to make the tomato sauce in with the mince. So what we have done already is we've cooked our onions, sweated off our onions, and our garlic and our bacon. We've then added the mince meat, and if you like at this point you could add a little splash of wine, just to add a little bit of depth of flavour to it. Then we're going to add our chopped tomato. We're going to use a little bit of tomato passata. That's like a tomato puree. And we're going to add in a little bit of chopped carrot, another little sneaky way of getting some more veg into the children. It's a little grated carrot, so it'll disintegrate and fall in. You won't even know it's there. A little spoon of the dried oregano, and our chopped basil, or if you had some marjoram or oregano, you can add the fresh ingredients as well. So we're just going to let that cook and add a little bit of sugar, just even a half a dessert spoon or a teaspoon of sugar. And if you find that it's a little bit dry, you can add a little bit more of the passata, and we won't forget our salt. And I'm using Maldon sea salt to bring out the flavour. So we're just going to let this cook out for about 10-15 minutes, because it's going to cook more when it's in the lasagna between the layers of pasta. But before we do that, we're just going to make sure, we're going to check the seasoning, make sure we're happy with the flavour, because once it's in between the layers of pasta you won't be able to change the flavour. So we need a nice tomato sauce running through the meat, and I'm just going to add another little bit of passata just to make sure it's nice and tomatoey. Another ingredient that some people use is anchovies, just to bring out the flavour as well. It's not everybody's favourite ingredient, but it certainly gives it a depth and a richness of flavour. We'll just let that cook out there, and then we'll check it for seasoning, and we'll put it together with our lasagna sheets and our white sauce. So we have cooked our mince and bolognese sauce, or ragu sauce as some people call it, for about 10 minutes. We've just checked it for seasoning, and I noticed that it's just getting a little bit dry. So if you like, you can add a tiny little bit of water. The water will evaporate, and and leave you with your tomato sauce, which hasn't burnt in the pot. So just a little trick, let the water keep simmering it away there. It could do with another simmer, then you can do it with the lid on if you like, but we want the water to evaporate, so I'll just leave the lid off and we'll cook it there for another 15 minutes. Once you have it cooked for the 15 minutes, we will start to put everything together. So I have my white sauce here, and it's starting to, but I didn't cover the top there while I was waiting, starting to get a little bit lumpy. So I'll just give it another stir just to make sure it's nice and silky, shiny and not lumpy. Here I have some water. I have the tray I'm going to put the lasagna in, and I have some boiling water here with a little drop of oil. So what I want to do is just put in my lasagna sheets just for a few minutes, just to let them soak up a little bit of water so that they're easier to cut and put into the shape of the dish. We don't want them to be overlapping, and they just soften up so that you can cut them with a knife or cut them with the scissors, just so that they sit exactly into the size of your dish. Now, if you wanted to, you could always use the dry lasagna sheets and just place them in the dish and snap and break off where you think you need to make it a little bit smaller, and then just use your little pieces. But try not to overlap them, because then the pasta is double thick. So it's important to try not to overlap them. So you can dry the sheets of pasta in a colander if you like, or you can just pat them with a little bit of paper. So they're not quite soft enough yet, so I'll just give them another minute there. So you can see that we're a little bit too quick taking up the lasagna sheet. It just cracked lightly. So we've left them for another few minutes. I'm just going to pat it dry on the paper towel. And I like to put the lasagna sheet on the bottom. I feel when I'm lifting it up, it makes it a nice square. And you can see that the sheets have expanded already a little bit. They will expand. So now we can see that for this dish we don't need to cut any. It's if we place the lasagna sheets in that direction, that they fit exactly into the dish. So then I make sure I've tasted this. I'm very happy with the seasoning. I don't think it needs any more seasoning. And I start layering up my lasagna by putting first the bolognese, or the lasagna ragu. And remember, while we are doing it with mince, which is the traditional way, you can also use a minced pork mixed in with the minced beef. Or if you're a non-meat eater, it's sometimes nice to layer it with roasted butternut squash, or some aubergine, which you've just drizzled with oil and let dry out a little bit in the oven. Otherwise they'll be a bit too wet. And then I'm going to get my spoon, and I like to drizzle a little bit of white sauce in with the bolognese. But you just have to be careful to make sure that you don't use up your white sauce, because you really do need your white sauce for the top of the lasagna. So then we take our sheet again, just pat it dry, and do the same thing. All the way, and you see they're nicely spaced, they're not overlapping, and we do another layer. And for the top layer, we have our last 3 sheets. We're just going to spread a little more of the white sauce on top there, and reserving a good bit for the top. Now I'm using grated cheddar. You can use grated parmesan. You could use a mixture of the two if you wanted to, or if you wanted to use a stronger cheese. Just when children are involved, sometimes they prefer it not too strong. So we're just going to finish with a nice thick layer of white sauce, spreading it around. And making sure all the lasagna sheets are covered. And we're going to take our cheese and spread it over the top. Now I'm going to cover this with tin foil that I've oiled slightly so it doesn't get stuck to the cheese, and I'm going to bake it in a hot oven, 190 degrees, for about 20 minutes. Then I'm going to remove the tin foil and I'm going to bake it for another 35 minutes. You can always check it after the second baking and when you've removed the tin foil after about 20 minutes, just to make sure it's not browning. Sometimes ovens heat more on one side than the other, and you can just turn it around if it's doing that on you. You want it to be a light golden brown, nice and bubbling hot. So we'll just place it in the oven. As I said, 190 degrees. The first baking is done covered with tin foil, and I've oiled the tin foil slightly just to stop it sticking. And if you're worried about all that lovely sauce and everything bubbling over and getting your oven dirty, you can always place it on another tray, just to make sure you're not creating extra work for yourself. Okay, so we have taken the tin foil off about 20 minutes into the cooking time, and our lasagna has now been cooking for another 30 minutes, and you can see it's nice and brown. So we're just going to take it out and looks very nice and golden. Always remember when you're taking anything out of an oven to use a dry tea towel and or an oven glove. So when you're cutting the lasagna, just give it a few minutes to rest there and to settle into its shape. And when you're ready then to serve it, you can cut it with a knife just to get your portions. And then fish slice is great for lifting it up to put it on the plate. Usually you need the knife and the fish slice just to put it on the plate. So we've just waited a few minutes now, and we're ready to cut into our lasagna. You need the good sharp knife, and you can portion it, cutting through the nice layers that you've created. And if you like, you can eat it now, or you can use a plastic container or a tin foil container and put some of the portions into your container and freeze them, and it's very handy to have for another time. And here we're going to need our fish slice just to lift our portion up. It's lovely served with a nice salad, nice green salad, and there we have our lasagna ready to eat.